Hello again. Last time I was talking to you about the doorway of knowing God. Today I want to be more specific. How do we choose the right doorway? If you go into a big office building and you're looking for a place where you're going to get your interview or get your benefit or whatever you're looking for, in that big office building, there's hundreds of doors. How are you going to choose the right door? Well, in the kingdom of God, you certainly, if you want to know God, you're not going to look for a door that says biggest blessings for the least effort. Doesn't work like that. Now, as we saw in the last video, one of the scriptures I quoted was John 14:6. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. So if we want to know God, we have to go through Jesus. He is the way. He's not a way. Other religions say, well, it doesn't matter what religion you are as long as you're going after God and you're looking for God. It does matter. There's only one way, and he is called Jesus. Now, Jesus came as God's Son, a true representative of his Father, and he alone is the access to God to know him. The Apostle John wrote some letters near the end of his life, and those letters from the elderly John, mature letters, excellent letters, give us more information and more clarity on how we can make these decisions of choosing the right doorway. Let's have a look at what John wrote in his first epistle. 1 John chapter 2 verses 3 to 5. This is how we may discern that we're coming to know him. Great, that's what I want to know. This is how we can know and become better acquainted with him if we keep his teachings and his commandments. Whoever says I know him, I'm acquainted with him, but fails to keep his commandments and teachings is a liar. That's plain enough, isn't it? And the truth of the gospel is not in him. But he who keeps and treasures his word, who bears in mind his precepts, who observes his message in its entirety, truly in him has the love of and for God been perfected and reached maturity. By this we may know and be sure that we are in him. Simply put, if we say we know God and don't obey his word, we're liars. We have deceived ourselves, as it says in James 1, verse 22. So the first check is, do we know God, is whether we obey his word. Now I want to show you what I consider some of the most scary scriptures in the New Testament. It's in Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 to 23. Now, Matthew wrote down what Jesus said, and this is what Jesus said. Not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of God, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. So just because you've done certain things, as you'll see in the next verse, many will say, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Use the gifts of the Spirit. In your name we've cast out demons, as I do, I'm an exorcist. And in your name we've done many wonderful things. And I will profess to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work iniquity. Matthew 7, 21 to 23. Don't like those scriptures. They bring us to a screaming halt and say, what are we doing? Well, we're busy with ministry, aren't we? We're casting out demons, doing many wonderful things, getting people born again, and so on. But notice the criteria by which we can judge if we know God or are known by God is not whether we're using the gifts of the Spirit or whatever, but whether we have obeyed his will. Those that do the will of my Father. That's the only criteria. So, the correct doorway, when you're looking for the door to know if you know God or not, this is what you look for marked on the door. The door will say, enter if you obey God's will. Enter if you obey God's will. Now, Abraham's obedience to God's will was tested. Ours will be tested also. When Abraham had waited 13 years at least until he was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, God had promised him a boy. And he had a child called Isaac. Eventually, a miracle boy, Isaac, did arrive. Sarah gave birth to Isaac. And then when he grown up and was loved as a young boy and so on, obviously would be the apple of his eye, the desire of his father and mother. God said to Abraham, take him up Mount Moriah and offer him as a sacrifice. Now that was a big test. Now Mount Moriah is now known as the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, very famous piece of real estate. So Abraham took him up Mount Moriah and lifted the knife up, prepared the wood, lifted up the knife, bound his son to the wood, was going to stab him. And the angel of God shouted down from heaven, stop. For now I know, here's the key word again, knowing, I know that you fear God as you've not withheld your son. Genesis 22 and verse 12. God had to know if Abraham was willing to obey without understanding why. God knows the path ahead. We don't. We must trust him to lead us and guide us by faith, not knowing all the answers. So be ready to be tested. Look for the door when you're wanting to know God. Look for the door that's labelled. Enter those who will trust and obey without understanding why.